we are Blair and Dana Webb.
Hello.
We are the Webbs, and we are from Fright Night Sketches. We do zombie portraits, horror commissions, comic book covers, sketch covers.
Jack of all trades. We also do Partners in Crime, which is our own little kind of a family circus old school cartoon. We launch that once a year. We're also working on a bunch of future projects right now. We just did a coffee label for Deadly Grounds, and we did an album cover for Stolen Wheelchairs, punk band. It's an awesome band. If you like punk rock, check them out. But yeah, we got a lot of stuff on the...
And we also do cosplay.
Yeah, and we cosplay. We have our own cosplaying characters that we're developing. We got tons of other stuff. We just did a movie poster, I think.
Yep.
We got a few things going. Feel free to hit us up. We take on extra work right now. We got, maybe 3 or 4 spots before the holidays?
Sure. Yeah. Awesome. That's a lot. Anyway, and you're listening to Victims and Villains podcast, and it is a wonderful day for an exorcism.
Welcome to the show where we talk nerd, we talk hope,
and speak nothing else. I'm your co-host, Mark Pettit.
I'm your other co-host, Captain Nostalgia.
And this is episode 345, The Exorcist.
Nobody expected it. Nobody believed it. And nothing could stop it. The one hope. The only hope. The Exorcist. Rated R. The movie you've been waiting for. Without the wait.
Though before we start our show officially, we want to go ahead and let you guys know about a giveaway we are currently running from now until December 3rd. We are giving away 5 digital copies of the Josh Duhamel All-Star Casted comedy buddy games, in which Duhamel puts together a cutthroat competition where him and 6 of his friends come together to compete for a cash prize. The movie is currently out now on all digital platforms and VOD from Paramount Pictures, and all you guys got to do to win a copy of this movie is just tweet to us and let us know staple Thanksgiving Day food is for you and your family, and we will notify the winners on December 3rd. And it's also worth mentioning that we also have a companion mini episode with this episode that you're about to listen to on the Leap of Faith, the documentary, William Friedkin on The Exorcist, which you guys can stream exclusively now on Shudder, and it's a good day for a podcast. All right, welcome. Like Blair and Dana and Mark, my co-hosts, have said, it is a beautiful day outside for an exorcist, and we're all about bringing one another together. So this is weird because most people are getting ready for Thanksgiving, and we are spending all of our episodes and extra energies talking about The Exorcist, Leap of Faith, and real-life exorcisms with a pastor this week here at Victims and Villains. So let's go ahead and just kind of open this up, round table discussion. The Exorcist is revered often as one of the staples of the horror genre that every fan of the genre should see. But I'm curious, what's everyone's experiences with this movie, and kind of when did you guys find it? When did you guys kind of get introduced to it, and kind of like how is it sat with you, or impacted your love of the genre? Dana, being the woman of this podcast, why don't you go first?
The Exorcist for me was funny. I did find it hilarious. I guess I'm somewhat sadistic in that sense. I remember my mom telling me stories about it back when I was a teenager, and saying how back then, the movie being so scary that when people went to go see it in the theaters, you had people passing out, you had people being drug out by, first responders. Like it was nuts. It was insane. And then finally, like my mom introduced me to this movie, and I'm looking at her like, really? This was it? And she's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, it's funny. She said, how can you think this is funny? I'm like, I don't know. It's just funny. But I mean, as far as an impact goes, I don't know. Like it didn't have as much of an impact on me, I guess, as it did my mom or older generations when this first came out, because I guess when it did first come out, it was something that nobody has experienced before. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're of the Catholic faith, because you're raised that, oh my God, hell is the worst. Like if you don't believe in God, if you don't pray, you're going to go to hell and blah, blah, blah. And like, I guess this was the way of saying, this is what happens when you don't pray, like that sort of thing. So I guess in that sense, it had a big impact on people back then. Mm-hmm. But I think because we have so many parodies nowadays and so many, I mean, the movie Scary Movie does nothing but make fun of this movie. So, you got movies like that
lots of tongue action.
Yeah, you got movies like that this generation watches, and then of course when they finally see the movie, it's like, yeah, okay, this is kind of like unrealistic and funny. But that's my opinion. That's my take on it.
I think it's interesting too when you're talking about you had mentioned like the first time that you'd seen it. It's like, really, this is what all the hype's been about, and I feel like we live in this like at least like once every other month I come across an article that is like X movie is so scary on Netflix that audiences can't finish it, and those movies never really live up to the hype.
Right? It's so depressing. Because like you go in with such high expectations, you're like, oh my God, this is going to scare the boots off of me. I'm so ready. Like, fucking ready.
That's why most of the time I like to just go into movies not seeing trailers, reading any reviews. If I like the title and the synopsis and the people involved, then hopefully I'll just be captured by the movie itself versus what other people's perceptions of it were. Because so many times you just get your expectations kind of aren't met, and then you're disappointed because it wasn't as good as you were imagining.
Right. Well, I just love how critics, whenever a new movie comes out, suddenly that's the number one movie in America.
Yeah.
Okay. What movies can we have?
Yeah.
Blair, what's your experience with this movie?
Exorcist growing up. I mean, so my dad had a crisis of faith, so he was a little bit of every religion at one point. So yeah, I was brought up with the whole, this is what happens. This is very real. So this could happen to a child. So it was scary for the first time. And then, of course, after you watch it the first time as a kid, you don't watch it again because it scared you. And then, I guess, a few years later after that, I was kind of right in the same boat with Dana. I actually, I watch it now and I just laugh. I'm right there with Beetlejuice. I watched it over 50 times or so, and it does keep getting funnier. I mean, you got that whole instance where she goes to the doctor. Okay, so she's a little hyperactive. We're going to give her Ritalin. Then the next scene, they're going up the stairs. What'd you give her? Ritalin. She's flipping up and down in the bed.
Like, holy shit, don't child Ritalin.
This is a big ad for don't give kids Ritalin. Look what happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was scary as a kid. But then, as you grow up and you look at it now, and it's like, no, this was bad special effects. I do love the practical effects in it because of at the time for the time of the movie, it was cool. But I mean, you could skip that whole Indiana Jones segment in the beginning and still have a decent movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's my take on it. At this point, it's just kind of funny. I mean, we just watched it with the kid.
Yeah, we did. She fell asleep.
I'm out. Peace.
She's like, well, this is crap.
So it's interesting. During my week of research, when Bill Blatty actually had handed in the first draft of The Exorcist to his publisher, they said something very similar with the Northern Iraq scene and like the studio, like every composer that William Friedkin had actually taken the to the movie to get scored was saying the same thing, like that it just didn't belong. And like Mark, before we get into you, man, I'm kind of curious. Like, I want to like slightly shift the conversation since Blair brought it up, but like, why do you think that sequence in particular doesn't exist or doesn't need to exist for the movie to be good?
Who are you?
Was that for me?
Yeah, who are you directing the question to?
You can direct it towards anybody who wants to answer that one, because I have some thoughts on it myself, but I want to just bounce off with someone first.
Well, honestly, I mean, think about it. I get. So if you look at, you can look at The Exorcist in a few different ways. If you wanted to, you could break the whole film down as The Exorcist being almost a superhero in the sense, because they establish him as an Indiana Jones type of a character. They throw in a really short backstory in regards to the fact that he handled a possession in Africa that almost killed him, and that he's currently back in the States and, you know, living somewhere writing a book.
It wasn't Africa.
Well, whichever. But my point is that it was like way away, and then he was the only one that they could contact really and bring him to this to kind of solve the mystery, if you will. So you could look at it in that sense, the fact that, okay, so you're establishing a character of the Exorcist, not the Damien character, but obviously this old dude who they didn't give. That was like his backstory was just he was away in Iraq. He goes through in the archaeology end of things. They do throw in that demon, like really briefly, like he sees the demon sculpture that he saw back then. But you could cut that entire portion of the film out from the beginning and still had a decent movie.
Yeah, because then you don't even see his character again until the actual exorcism.
Or they could have established his character a hell of a lot better and gone through and showed you, instead of a previous archaeology scene, shown you his previous dealings with an exorcism.
Like, why was he even there to begin with? Like, what was he looking for? Why?
They handled it they handled a quick conversation between two priests. Let's call this guy. Okay, that's like calling Ghostbusters. Thanks.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, because it, again, like this, I've seen it 2 times now, not a ton, but again, just still not really seeing how that beginning really connects with the rest of the movie besides the character Father Mirren. And I think they could have created a better backstory in a different way by actually like opening up with that exorcism. But again, maybe they're wanting the exorcism in the whole movie, in kind of the entire movie being the build up, the slow build up to that exorcism. But yeah, I think there could have been a different way of giving Father Mirren's backstory for sure.
Well, so, and the other problem is too, that relic that he does find has no correlation to the story whatsoever. But they make it so that it almost seems like this is connected when it has nothing to do with it whatsoever.
Like they could have made her sculpting that relic. I mean, if they wanted to pull that demon in, like if it was an ancient spirit that he had uncovered and had let loose on the world, and then the little kid who's playing with Captain Howdy, it pulled her into her, and then she's doing nothing instead of sculpting those weird creatures, but she keeps sculpting that same sculpture. I mean, you could have done that and had a far better experience of the movie.
Like not sculpting, but like drawing, like her little drawings and stuff. Yeah,
everything else. Pull it in that way.
just so it would connect
Yeah.
somehow. Otherwise, why?
Yeah, and that could have done a better job of like showing like how the girl, I don't remember her name, Sharon, was it maybe Sharon?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and but how she was like innocent, but then slowly morphing into this all-powerful demon that, and it's kind of very, very against who she was as a person, but starting to see that creepiness in her drawings and things that used to be so innocent.
Right.
So I think that I might be the only one in here this conversation right now that has read the book. And if I'm
Yeah, I was.
Yes.
book is phenomenal, and I noticed that there are like little details in the movie that it's a very close adaptation, but there are very like small details that are omitted. And one of them is the fact that there's like this conversation between Chris and a psychiatrist where they're talking about Ouija boards and like the spiritual ramifications that thereof. And you don't see that in this movie. And it does a better job at kind of explaining the connection between, you know, Captain Howdy, Reagan, and Pazuzu, and kind of like unifying that story. And the opening, I feel like I could take or leave, because like from a story standpoint, like there are arguments that say it doesn't necessarily add anything to the story, but then there are also these like visual cues that allow it to kind of like set the tone that if you're going to do a demonic possession movie that's going to be very grounded. And Dana, to your point about, you know, the older generations like passing out and this being a terrifying movie in theaters, is because and we'll talk about this in our spinoff episode from this, the Leap of Faith. One of the things that Freakin talks about in that Shudder documentary is the fact that he wanted to have this very grounded approach to the story. And I feel like, you know, when you're talking about things, whether or not you believe in you know, demons, or whether or not they're mythologies, either way they're ancient beings. And so I think that the northern Iraq and kind of the archaeological dig that we get to see Father Marion go through in the prologue for this kind of allows the story to be set in a grounded manner without feeling too ham-fisted, and allows you to really understand the slow burn and the tension that you're going to start to experience over the course of these next 2 hours.
Fair enough. Makes sense. I just feel like they could have done something a little different just to connect it a little more, to like portray that same sense.
Sure.
Ouija board feels like it got cut. It got like left on the cutting room floor, doesn't it? It's in the series.
Yeah, and there are like certain like little details that they omitted from this that like are in the novel. So like the dinner party sequence where Reagan comes down and she looks specifically to the older gentleman and says, "You're gonna die up there." That entire sequence in the book is revolving around a rabbi and a soon-to-be astronaut talking about his like journey of like training to go up into space. And like,
oh wow.
That would
Yeah, what up?
yeah, so it's like this entire, like, I mean, it's a very long scene too that they omit, but like Freakin has like gone on record saying like he didn't believe that we needed backstory. And it's like, well, if you don't have the backstory for some of these certain characters, these elements don't really translate that well to film. They just kind of feel like a jumbled mess.
Yeah. Because now you're just throwing stuff together and it's like, yeah, movie.
Yeah. Mark, what was your experience with this?
So I was raised in like a very conservative Christian home. So my dad was an associate pastor my whole time growing up, and we were in a very like conservative Baptist church. And my first experience with The Exorcist was just the movie being brought up in sermons and being like viewed as one of the worst movies ever. And so I definitely wasn't allowed to watch it growing up. But I mean, I wasn't allowed to watch like Harry Potter or even the Chronicles of Narnia. There's a lot of things that were sworn off. But yeah, so I used to like absolutely hate horror just because I wasn't really exposed to it. But then I started watching it in my early 20s and have really grown into enjoying it. It's one of my favorite genres now. But my first time of action.
What I've been missing?
Put me in today and keep the news off. It'll be fine.
Yeah, so my first time of watching it, I was probably like 24 or 25. And I was watching it with my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time and one of our friends. And I actually basically slept through the entire thing. Like I would, I watched like the first opening scene, watch the opening scene, and then I would fall asleep for like 5 or 10 minutes and wake back up and be in some other scene, and I would fall back asleep. And so, yeah, I slept basically the entire movie. And at the time, I thought it was like pretty boring and didn't understand the significance of it. But again, kind of echoing what Dana and Blair were saying, like I grew up knowing that it was like such a hyped movie, and then didn't get that when I watched it the first time. So that was like 5 years ago, and then I watched it again for this podcast recently, and again, I don't think it hits on the same notes, but I definitely see how people back then could have been so scared about it. Because again, like this is one of those things where it's like playing with faith, which had never really been done in horror movies. And also it hits very close to home with a mother-daughter relationship. And most of the time the horror back in the day was about these things outside the home, these monsters, these creatures, these things that you didn't really exist. But this brought it very, very close to home, very close to faith. And that I think was very scary back in the day.
I think too, what makes that relationship between Reagan and her mother that much more impactful, especially for the time that it was released, and even now, is the fact that you have a single parent dynamic, which really wasn't seen too much in those days. And I feel like, even now, you have more and more families that are increasingly led by single parents for just a number of variety of different reasons. And so I still feel like, in a way, like it makes that dynamic and what Reagan ends up going through that much more tragic for Chris to see throughout the entirety of this movie.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. And that almost is like how the kind of building on that, like how the McNeils were kind of isolated from others. They didn't have a ton of support, and the support that they were receiving, I guess from Burke and some of the other friends, like that was dwindling. And so that's even scary, kind of very real. Like if you don't have the support systems in your life to deal with these things when they come up, like that's quite scary.
I think for me too, I'm also gonna be on the side of Mark on this one. Is that I grew up in a very conservative household. Horror movies were very much frowned upon in my day and age. And when I first became fascinated with film as a medium, I began hearing the stories, the behind the scenes stuff that went on with The Exorcist and Jaws and The Crow and Poltergeist and The Omen, and just all of these movies that, were just landmarking. And like the 70s is like such a landmark time because you have films like The Exorcist and Jaws, but then you turn around, you have something as monumental as Star Wars that are, films that we're still talking about almost 50 years later. And I had never kind of seen, because of the exorcisms, you know, because of the exorcist, like, again, it was kind of like very frowned upon to watch something like that. But one of the things that I still stand by even today in my faith is that Christians don't talk about hell the way that they ought to. So it's kind of like this like taboo topic. So when you throw in something like demonic possession and demons, and you riddle that in a movie, that's a big red flag that you don't watch. And so that's the kind of the way that I was raised, and I had that mentality in my head till probably about 2 or 3 years ago. And one night I just sat down and watched it, and I kind of didn't understand like all the hype about it, and kind of felt the same way that you did, Mark, and a lot of, Mark and Blair and Dana as well, like just kind of didn't understand like how this thing was so monumental and like regarded as like a cornerstone and like a masterpiece of the genre, and just like all of these other things that I heard people tell me my entire life. And I feel like now revisiting it in this like shotgun way that I've just surrounded my entire week with rounds, whether it has been Blatty's book, the Brad Dourif threequel, or even this documentary on Shudder, Leap of Faith. Like, I have a much more matured just reverence for this movie. And to me, this movie doesn't feel like a horror movie, but it feels like a very stylized drama that just happens to have horror elements in it.
Yeah, it's more accurate.
Yeah.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
It's by far not scary. I mean, I get that people should definitely put it into their catalog of, you should definitely see it, kind of like a, level up. Yeah, I watched it.
Yeah.
Just to get to that next.
But again, remember, our generation, we're going to be like, oh my God, this is ridiculous, because we have so many horror movies now and have like torture porn, gore porn, and everything like that.
Yeah.
Whereas back then they didn't have that. So what we grew up to be desensitized to, they were like, oh my God, this has never been done. Like, this is crazy. This is insane. So in that aspect, like I've mentioned earlier, I can totally understand why people were freaking out about this movie, because this was like brand new to them.
just think about all the hype and all the scare behind the Ouija board itself. Milton Bradley puts out a product in the 70s called a Ouija board by William Foote, Mystical Oracle, and people now are looking at it going, "Oh my God, there's evil here." And in all honesty, if you do the research, you can find out that behind the sticker, they lace a little bit of metal behind each of the letters. So yeah, it's pulling. It's called magnets. In the plant.
Here's a fun fact for listeners, though, is that when Blair draws, he actually draws on the Ouija board.
Well, actually, well, it's funny because Blair is currently working on a Conjuring piece. So,
I'm working
he would come downstairs at like 2 or 3 in the morning, witching hour, of course, and be drawing on this Ouija board, doing Conjuring, and he'd be freaking himself out.
Yeah,
He's like, "Holy shit!"
I got more goosebumps from drawing the nun on a Ouija board at 3 o'clock in the dark, in quiet, dead of night, than I did that whole Exorcist movie. And like realizing like I know the history of the Ouija board and whatnot, so it doesn't bother me anymore. But I do. I draw on a Ouija board, and we've actually lost business because the super religious people will come up, see the Ouija board,
and be like, "Oh, damn.
Never mind."
Oh, damn.
It's like, wow. It's just a really nice, easy board to draw.
And it goes very well with Blair's aesthetic from a convention standpoint, and just getting to know Blair the last couple of years, like it fits his personality. So if you see him at a convention, don't be turned off. Just go up and give him your money.
I promise we're nice. We're actually people. Just worship Satan, that's all.
Yeah.
But something else that Blair and Dana are, and the reason that I really wanted to bring them on specifically for this episode, was the fact that you guys are relatively new parents.
Yep.
Yes.
And so, like, how does something like, Chris's journey of kind of watching your child go through this torment kind of affect your viewpoint on some of her hurts throughout the course of this film to watch her child go through all of this?
Well, I'm going to chime in, obviously, because it's a mother-daughter. So I'm going to say the one thing I did respect the most from the mother's character is the fact that she was so patient with everything that was going on. And the fact that even though she was hosting a huge dinner party, she thought nothing of her daughter coming down and just, popping a squat right there on the rug in front of everybody. And she's like, "Excuse me, I'm really sorry. She's sick." Instead of being like, "Oh my God, that's our rug. What are you doing?" She was very nurturing in that sense. Whereas, any other mother you hear a lot of these mothers that raise their child in a snooty aspect, I guess. And, they had money and she was an actress and everything like that. And she was anything but snooty and pompous and rude, and actually really took good care of her daughter and was there for her daughter through and through. And I love that.
She was an advocate for her.
Yeah.
Even though she couldn't count, because there were not 88 doctors in that room.
Yeah, there were certainly not.
We'll leave that out.
But I just love the patience and the nurturing behavior of Reagan's mother versus any other mom that could have just been like, "This is ridiculous. I'm putting you away. I'm sending you off." And it's sad to think that there are some mothers that just don't have the time and the patience for their child.
Yeah, we're worried about the rug than the kid.
Exactly. But as far as, see, it's so hard because thinking that the movie was funny, I can't really put myself in her shoes when it comes to the actual exorcism and everything that she's going through, because it's so far-fetched and so unrealistic that it's like
the only thing you could equate it to would be if your child was suffering from a traumatic illness, in which case, yeah, it would be heartbreaking. But as a parent, you would want to, do pretty much everything that mother did in the movie is nurture and get the best tests and try to go and try every single thing, including the far out. I mean, At one point they said aliens, and I'm pretty sure she was on board. But
hey, I'd be like, cool.
So
let's
she was
some
aliens. Good. That would explain the weird crucifix thing. But yeah. I mean, she did everything in the movie, but yeah, as parents, you want to do every single thing for your kid as far, you'll take it as far as you can to make sure that your kid can grow up strong.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of watching one of my best friends become a father over the last year, and just seeing a lot of the restless mornings that he has from just like not sleeping because he wants to just pour all of his energy into his kid is just something that's like admirable. And my wife and I have talked about like kids, and like it's not in the cards for us. And now that I've said that in a recording, it's out there forever. So
can't take it back.
I can't. But my heart like really goes out to people out there that want to be parents and that are great at being parents. And I remember the last convention that Blair and I had done together in person, and it was actually the first time that I had met Dana. In Blair was like, yeah, Paranoia Con. He was like, yes, I'm gonna be a dad, and it's like immediately I was like, Blair's gonna be a great father. And like the very little bit that I had met Dana, I was like, these guys are equally together, just going to be great parents. And
thanks.
Yeah. And I think that there are certain people that when you meet them, you just automatically know that if they ever had kids or if they do have kids, that they're automatically great parents. And Chris is, when you watch her throughout the course of this movie, she is just restless, just wanting to get the best for her kid. And I feel like there are plenty of parents out there that really will resonate with that. And I feel like that's kind of where this story shifts from horror to more humanistic elements, to where you're spending the duality of this time up until the last 30 minutes where it's the actual exorcism. You're spending time with Father Karras, who we'll talk about in just a few minutes, but you're also talking about this mother-daughter dynamic. And there's such a wholesome feeling when you first meet them. One of the things that I wrote down in my notes was like the scene where Sharon's getting ready to finish up making them dinner, and Reagan walks into the shot and grabs a cookie, and Chris just kind of like chases her down and like tackles her and like tickles her, and it's like such a wholesome scene. Yeah. And I think Friedkin does a really great job at establishing the dynamic and the wholesomeness of this not only this dynamic, but also this her as a mother and Reagan as a daughter. I think that they do a really good job. It's like it's that much more tragic when you see ultimately how the movie ends up with the possession in the final act.
Is it bad that I feel like the movie would have been just fine had it just been like Reagan and Sharon the whole time, just as a mother-daughter? Like, take out the exorcism, take out the priest and everything like that, and let's just watch a movie just on their relationship, especially when there are, parents out there that can learn a lot from their relationship.
Yeah, and especially when you go throughout the course of just how exhausted she becomes, just truthfully trying to get the best for her daughter.
Yeah.
That is just something that, I feel like one of the things that I wrote down in my notes this time around was that the fact that, you know, they're trying to rationalize everything that they can. And religion, I feel like for a lot of people is like you either are 100% sold out or you're somewhere in between or you're an atheist. It's like there's really like no like gray areas between, like you fall into one of those three categories. And throughout the entire time, like, you know, we're still fairly early, especially in the early 70s, of like understanding the brain to the capacity and the diseases and the mental health aspects that come with it in that way. And they even mention it to where, you know, she's trying to exhaust everything that she can. And that first exchange that she has between Father Karras and herself, where she's on the park bench, where he's like, well, you know, it's not really an exorcism you need, it's a psychiatrist. And she's like, well, I just went to the psychiatrist and they're sending me to you and you're going to send me back to them. Like, she just wants the best for her daughter, and she just wants healing and peace to be evident with her daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100% with that.
And I think a lot of other movies have handled that, like, parent-child relationship in similar situations just so poorly, like never believing the child, like I think if it would have been in another movie, like she would have called out Reagan's, telling her like she was just drawing attention to herself and she needed to settle down. And
right, and that was exactly my point as well, that there are just so many other parents out there that would just had no time for their child whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Reagan's mother was like a Hollywood, a socialite, kind of had a lot of things going on, but was still very human, very connected. And like, even with like a lot of the shots, like where they are interacting, like this probably has to do more with like the technology they used back then for recording, but you can sometimes barely hear them. You barely see them because they're obstructed by the comforter on the bed. And it's just like, watching that from like a bird's eye view, like, yeah, it's not the best from a cinematic perspective, but if you look at it like, okay, I'm like a fly on the wall watching this like very organic relationship taking place, and I mean, this is very real, and I think that was a really cool thing that they captured.
Yeah.
One of the things too that the book explores, just to kind of bring Chris around a little bit more full circle in terms of where she stands in Hollywood and in those social circles, is that there's a scene where she is like, it's a one-sided phone call, and she's in the movie, she's talking to someone, and she's like, you know, hey, like, I can't do it, I can't make it, it's my daughter. There's an entire subplot that they took out from the book. But in the book, she was actually offered a position to direct. And so she was given this opportunity to advance her career. And then it happens, like, just so happens that Reagan starts to experience the possession and get sick right around those times. And so that's something that, you know, she completely did, where I think that there are some people out there that, you know, just happen to be parents and would, again, only watching through observation. I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to this. I can't say what I would do in this situation, but, you know, given the choice of advancing my career or, you know, being a good parent, it's hard to say, because I feel like some parents would rather advance their career because they think, you know, my kids will thank me in the long run, or, you know, they want what's best for the kid. And ultimately, whichever one you pick, you know, this is a podcast where we're talking about mental health. The choices that parents make today affect the mental health of a kid tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%.
Bam, and drops mic.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. One of the things that I found myself really relating to on this show, and I think that when it comes to faith or spirituality, that all of us are kind of on different pages. And, you know, Father Karras, his journey of losing his mother very early in the story, and then progressively kind of like having this crisis of faith throughout the entirety, where he's actually sitting in a diner, a bar, across from another, you know, priest that's kind of oversees his, I guess, like chapter is what they call it, and just kind of like wanting out because he doesn't believe this anymore, like, and coming face to face with the supernatural demon, and just comes some of the conversations like, you know, this is a journey of faith. And Blatty has said, not Blatty, Will Friedkin has said on multiple occasions that this is a movie that explores the mystery of faith. And I know for me, like, especially reading the book this past week and watching the movie, a lot of the stuff that Karras goes through connected with me on a deeper level this past rewatch, because like I'm a Christian, and you know, I have my own problems with the way that systematic religion is consumed and experienced by certain people. That's another conversation. But you know, I think at the same time, like, I've also had those crises of faith where it's like, well, why do I believe with this? You know, why do I believe in what the Bible says? Or why do I believe in, you know, a Christian should, you know, read their Bibles or pray daily? You know, why do I believe that, you know, racism is wrong, or that sexism is wrong, or, you know, just kind of like some of the other gray areas that we get into. And I kind of wanted just to spend the next couple of minutes talking about the crisis of faith that this film just implores throughout the Father Karras character. So whoever wants to kind of speak up, the floor is now yours.
Crisis of faith. Oof. Yeah, I've seen crisis of faith in other people. In regards to this film, like you see, I think they needed to touch more in regards to, they show a really quick montage of his wall. Like, he used to be a boxer, he used to do other things prior to it, and it almost seems like maybe him looking at those photos just in that brief scene, they should have probably expanded on that a little bit more to show that, you know, he clearly had a separate life prior to taking on the role that he's in.
My concern with the whole faith aspect is the fact that they didn't make the priests as religious as they probably should have. I mean, you have priests in this movie that smoke cigarettes. Now, any Catholic knows that, you know, that's kind of like ruining your body, and God supposedly frowns upon that. So if you're trying to teach religion and teach about God and what God believes and everything like that, you can't go around and be a hypocrite and, I don't know, do those things that you're telling other people not to do.
I mean, from a personal perspective, I mean, I can look at it a different way altogether. And I mean, on more of a personal note, like my father was a bit of a drunk, but he ended up, because of that, cleaning himself up, but then tried to kind of buy his way into heaven kind of thing. So in this long childhood that I had with him was bouncing from religion to religion and watching the man just donate all kinds of money to the churches. So unfortunately, that ended up meaning that I've been Methodist, I've been Catholic, I've been Baptist, I've been foot washing Baptist. That was weird.
I'm honestly not too far off from you there.
I've been Pentecostal for a week while he dated that girl, and then I was New Church. Now, New Church was very strange for me. We all laid down. I didn't understand what that was all about. We didn't have pews because it was all very communal and whatnot. We all had to lay down on the floor for our moments of silence thing. So I thought that was really, really weird.
Did you at least get blankets and pillows?
No.
Oh,
No
damn.
blankets and pillows. But the foot washing, man, they pulled out a tub. They pulled out this screen. They threw you in a white sheet. And in front of everybody, they got the one dude standing in the big tub, and they just make this line. They walk you in. And they dunk you in the tub and you walk out on the other side. It was like watching a movie because they turn out the lights in the church. So all you're seeing is the people that are getting baptized.
And do they dunk your feet or do they dunk?
No, they just dunk you, like your whole body. Boom. In. You're baptized. Moving on. Next, you. Dunk. Go. Move. You. Dunk. It's just very, very strange. Like I can get behind, all of and all of them. Let's face it, they all kind of have the same method. Don't do bad shit.
Be a good person.
Be a good person.
Don't be a dick.
In all of the religions, that never changed. In the Catholic religion, you got a lot of exercise and a lot of handshaking. But like stand, kneel, sit, stand, kneel. Yeah.
Used to call them.
Then you ended up with a peace be with you. But that was
except during
cool.
flu season.
Yes, but then you had to make sure you also had to get the other stuff down. But yeah, I mean, I'm going through the gambit with him and seeing everything with him. That was a huge crisis of faith, and in the end, it's like it comes down to just either just buy into it and buy into one, whichever one suits you best. And own it and start to put that and implement it into your life and kind of live by that. Or just enjoy the fact that it's out there and it's there for you if you want it, but you don't necessarily have to force it on people. In the end of the day, for me, it was just, you don't do bad stuff. And I've had my share of, I don't knock people for being religious. I don't knock people for not being religious. I think that everybody needs to just enjoy life, man, and live while you live.
So it's interesting when you're talking about religion, because I feel like religion is one of those things that it goes back to the old adage, like, know your room, know your audience.
Read the room.
Read the room.
Yeah, read the room. That's the word I was looking for. And like, to me, like, I don't shy away from the fact that I'm a Christian and I'm very sold to my convictions and my faith. I know what I believe, and I've seen some wild and crazy stuff that have solidified that. And then you have stories much like what you're talking about, Blair, where you just kind of go through the gambit of everything that's out there, and you experience these weird things. And here's the thing that I think a lot of people fail to realize, and don't ask me why, but one of the things that I love doing and I'm fascinated by, a lot of people, cool, you're fascinated by true crime. I'm fascinated by the occult. I don't know why.
Yes. Yes.
But a lot of like the stories of like how cults in like different languages and like different cultures, like how they start is they typically start somewhere off of a Bible verse. Like, and it's weird to think about like how many actual like quote unquote cults come out of the Bible. Like someone just interprets it wrong, and then it's like, okay, well, hey, like it's like and there's a lot of things that we do wrong when it comes to religion, in general, I think, and that just again comes from like a misunderstanding. And so you continuously have these like all of these like offshoots of basically, like you said, Blair, like the same idea. And you get, all of these guys that are saying like, I'm the right one, I'm the real deal. And I love, there's a Simpsons quote that Homer's getting ready to die by a gang of zombies, and he's like, wait, before you kill me, what is the one true religion? And Krusty's like, oh, it's a cross between Buddhism and Methodist. And it's always interesting to me to like hear about like what people believe and like why they believe it, like what are the experiences of life that brought you to there. And I think that ultimately there's, to a degree, maybe it's not to the degree of myself or even Father Karras, like we all have that crisis of faith at one point that we're either going to, like you had said, Blair, like you're either going to buy into it and this is how I'm going to live the rest of my life, or you're just going to walk away from it because, of a lot of like what Dana was saying, like the hypocritical things, and we see it throughout the entire course of here, riddled throughout the entire movie. But I think for Father Karras, a lot of that stuff just kind of comes from his crisis of faith. Like, he smokes and he drinks because he's questioning, am I truly sold on this idea of my body being the temple of God? Like, or is it like, am I really relating to this boxer or to this psychiatrist? Like why do I believe what I believe?
Yeah, definitely. And I gotta weigh in on your occult because I too fell victim of falling down the rabbit hole with the occult. Actually, ever since I was a young child, like single digit child, that is something that has always resonated with me. And I grew up in a very controlling household, mainly my father. It's funny because my mom is Jewish and my father was Catholic, but he was so controlling in the sense that he forced my mother to raise me Catholic. So it turned out like I had to go to church every Sunday. I had to be an altar server, the whole nine, like took me right down the gambit. And in the meantime, I'm not interested in any of it. I just want to know more about the occult, more about witchcraft, more about vampirism. Give me the occult. And my brother went to New Orleans one time and brought back a legit voodoo doll that I was just so like invested in. I'm like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. So I, like an idiot, because I also went to Catholic school. I, like an idiot, brought it to school like as a show and tell type thing. Catholic school, mind you. And the next thing you know, my whole class is forming crosses with their pencils and hissing at me, calling me a devil. I'm like, yeah. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, these are the same kids that are being taught, be nice to other people, be all forgiving and everything like that. And it was like the same thing with our neighborhood. We all belong to the same church. We all belong to the same religion. And I would just hear these stories, like these same people would call me little Jew brat because they knew my mom was Jewish and everything like that. But yet go to church every Sunday and pray to a Jew. Go figure.
Yeah.
So it's like that alone is just that along with having religion forced down my throat caused me to be like, you know what? Screw religion. I'm just going to be my own person and believe in whatever I believe in. I'm not going to set my ways on any specific religion and
force yourself on anything.
Yeah, and not be forced on anything. And I just want to learn about all cultures and all beliefs and figure out what exactly resonates with me. But yeah, and I guess that was my crisis of faith.
So when I first kind of got into my own faith, I will say, because there's a point in your life where you kind of are at this crossroads. Like, do I keep going to church because, my parents tell me to, or am I really believing this? And I had that whole ideology of, I'm going to fully take on this. And I used to start preaching at youth groups and around the area where I grew up in. And I was very much this fire and brimstone kind of speaker that if you didn't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. And man, I look back and there's so much of me that is so heavy with regrets and just some of those things, because I've had more meaningful conversations now as a matured Christian on, you're saying, Dana, just hearing about other people's perceptions of the world and religion and their stories and their experiences, and having these really deep, insightful conversations about that kind of stuff, and respecting and meeting people. Because I think that at the end way, if you want to really win someone over, you're not going to do it by telling them they're wrong. You're going to do it by listening and actually taking an invested interest and loving them wherever they are at life.
Right.
Accepted.
And I feel like that's how God is supposed to be. And all these religions are trying to be well, if you eat meat on Fridays, God's going to damn you to hell. But at the same time, it's oh yeah, this God is this all forgiving being. And it's well, you just told me that if I didn't eat meat, or if I ate meat on Fridays, I'm being damned. So is he forgiving? Is he not forgiving? What?
Yeah. So many people have done so much damage in the name of religion. It's honestly quite sad. And even I know we don't have a ton of time left, but I was definitely raised in a very similar background as Josh, very conservative, but then even did a lot of preaching growing up and have reflected on my times in that. And I still am a practicing Christian, but my faith has definitely changed quite a bit over the past several years. And just very poignant, very memorable things have happened. And especially here recently, I don't know, this is not a political podcast, but I've seen so many Christians holding faster, holding harder to their political party and voting for somebody who's the antithesis of what they believe, what they preach from the pulpit. And people see that, and the hypocrisy just is such a killer of faith for the people on the fringes of it.
Yep.
Politics have no place in the pulpit. I just want to throw that out there. One of the things
country cannot be run by religion.
One of the things that I learned from my last job was that there are a couple things that you don't ever talk about things with customers, and it's religion and it's politics. Those are the two no-nos that you just don't ever do. And that's why I say that I feel like conversations about religion or politics are better in those one-on-one and more intimate settings. It's okay, you want to tell me about what you believe politically or religiously, so let's go grab a coffee and let's talk about it, and let's hear each other out and have those kind of conversations. Because I think in the long run, you trying to throw your religious beliefs or your political views or whatever views on me, they have a greater chance of alienating me from your viewpoint rather than aligning me with your viewpoint.
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the problem is a lot of the time too, when you're trying to have a civil, rational conversation and hear each other out 9 times out of 10, because people become so radical that it's like, okay, we can't really sit down and have this nice conversation and hear each other out, because all you want to do is tell me why I should believe in your views and not understand and not be open-minded enough to hear me out and understand why I believe what I believe and everything like that, because people are just so wrapped in their ways and so jaded, I guess.
Mm.
And to pull it back to the movie, that could actually have been an even cooler idea. Instead of trying to let the watcher try to pull that all together, they could have had Father Karras trying to explain more of that situation to a group of priests, but the priests pushing themselves on one angle and one angle only and not listening to him. That would have made a better movie, but that's
I like that.
Yeah.
But speaking of Father Karras, I really want to get your guys' viewpoint, since we're coming down to like the end of this episode. One of the things that Freakin' has talked about over the years is the ambiguous nature of this ending. And so this movie ends with Father Karras getting the demon propelled from Reagan into him, and he is like takes control of it very briefly and then tosses himself out the window. It's been kind of like noted over the years that this was a conscious effort by Karras to kill himself, because he does carry a degree of depression throughout the entire vantage point of this movie. But also some people think that it was the demon that drove him to death. I kind of wanted to know how you guys interpreted this ending and what you guys thought about it.
It's actually one of my favorite parts of the movie.
The priest dies. Great.
No, I love so if you watch it carefully and you watch that hand, let's face it, that hand moves exactly like one of my other favorite horror movies, which is Evil Dead. So the deadite feel of that hand just kind of moving all of his fingers, almost like rattling, like just waiting at the bottom of the stairs. And then later on in, what is it, Exorcist 3, they show you that he ends up just being a long kept secret locked in a basement.
Yeah, that rewatching like The Exorcist, or watching it for the first time this past week, I loved that like twist and duality between him and Brad Dourif was amazing.
Yeah.
But I do agree that I think maybe what had happened was Father Karras thought by killing himself he would have killed the demon, when in fact obviously that wasn't the case at all. I mean, that could have been a thing too, whereas, he'd rather, I guess, sacrifice himself than see this child go through what she went through, and hoping that, and obviously his mother played a big part in his life, and once he lost his mother, you could see he kind of like his life kind of started going downhill, and I think playing back on what you had said about his depression, absolutely that played a big factor. And again, I think it was more of, well, I'm just going to take me and this demon out at the same time and hope it works out. Spoilers, it doesn't.
Yeah, I think that if he didn't gain control over the demon, it would have not aligned with the rest of the movie and where it was heading. And so I do think that, again, like Freakin' doesn't even himself doesn't really know exactly the meaning of the ending, but I do think that Father Karras, in his struggles with depression, with his faith, brings the demon upon himself. And even though committing suicide is a sin and would have doomed his soul to hell, from the vantage view of his faith, he did it anyways. And though I guess the reasoning behind that might be a little questionable, and could be that he's trying to be in the afterlife with where his mother is at. I don't know, but yeah, I do think that for one reason or another, Karras does do it intentionally.
Yeah. But yet again, also play into the whole hypocritical priest.
Whoever wants to join me with the demon jumps out the window and escapes, he gets to live.
But again, with the whole faith aspect, that's the problem I have with it, because you have these priests and they're just hypocritical throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, go check out the movie Spotlight for more on that. But one of the things that I think that this is kind of like, and I think it's a bit of both. So I think it's to kind of pull from another lore. It's Bruce Wayne takes up the mantle of Batman because he doesn't want anyone else to go through what he went through as a boy at the hands of Joe Chill. And I think that this priest knows that if this demon gets loose in this world or gets to inhabit someone else, that ultimately what's going to end up happening is that this whole exorcist and this like just exorcism and like the home wrecker that Pazuzu ultimately was between this mother-daughter dynamic is just going to repeat itself in other forms. And so I think that a part of it he doesn't want history to repeat itself in that regard, but I think that also too that he's kind of made this conscious decision that he's at this crisis of faith, his depression is thick, and like I think that is just a really dangerous place to be. So he kind of consciously makes the decision to kind of kill two birds with one stone and hopes that it works. And, I just want to speak to that real quick because, we are a mental health awareness and suicide prevention podcast. Please, wherever you guys are listening to this right now, we have resources, a library of resources in the description wherever you guys are currently listening to this. Because depression is something that makes suicide look attractive and makes it look like it is your heart's desire. And I can tell you from someone that has gone through it that it is well worth the fight to come out on the other side. And please stay with us.
Yeah.
100%.
I've lost way too many people close to me to suicide.
And with that too, we're also going to head into and close out this show, but where can people find more about what the Webbs are doing in regards to commissions, cosplay, comics, all of everything that you guys have going on?
Wow, on a solid, happy note.
On a happier note. Oh, you're asking us where they can go.
Yeah. Well, chime in. Mostly Facebook, the Fright Night Sketches page on Facebook.
Yeah.
Find us on Facebook at Fright Night Sketches. Find Dana. Find myself.
Yeah, all on Facebook mostly. I do have a cosplay page and a modeling page called Daners.
Imaginary, what was it? The Imaginary Emporium of Brian Perry for any of the kids' books that I draw.
Yes.
Always go check that out. That's on
Nice.
Facebook. We got 2 comics going that we can't really talk about yet, so that's still out there.
Well, they know all that. They just want to know where they can find us.
Hit us up on Facebook. We're pretty friendly. We're pretty active. So.
And I know a little bit about the comics that they're working on, and please keep a lookout for them. It's wild, and it's going to be awesome when it finally sees the light of day. Mark, where can people find you online, my friend?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram at Pumpy Skunk, so PUMPY Skunk, and that's about it. I post pictures of the food I make, write for Victims and Villains, so you can kind of see those 2 areas of my life there.
So I'm only personally active on Facebook, or you guys can find me on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. But you guys can also go to victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can find links to past episodes, all of our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and Letterboxd. You guys can also find us wherever you guys get your podcasts from, and most importantly, suicide prevention resources as well. So until next time, remember to keep talking nerd, talking hope, speaking nothing else. Captain Howdy out.